Good afternoon, everybody. It's the noon hour, which is when we were going to start this session. I'm Steve Case, the Chairman and CEO of Revolution. And I just want to invite you to stay with us for the next 45 minutes or so as we talk about reopening and how that's going to impact a lot of startups in different parts of the country. We have three great kind of early stage founders from different parts of the country and different kinds of businesses, and they'll talk about that. But before we jump into it, I think it is worth given all we've been through as a nation, particularly in the past week, in light of the murder of George Floyd and the challenges we face as a country, just to acknowledge that in the world of innovation, entrepreneurship, venture capital, we all have work to do as well. We don't just need to use our voices to talk about racism and try to be part of the solution going forward. We also need to back more entrepreneurs of color. The statistics here are pretty sobering. We talk a lot about rise the rest and about place. Here's the data on race. About 14% of Americans are Black. About 1% of Black entrepreneurs get venture capital. So we do have a lot of work to do. We certainly at Revolution are committed to trying to mobilize our network to try to move forward in a more inclusive kind of way, and we hope others will as well. This crisis, this racism crisis, really comes on top of two other crises we faced as a nation. Obviously, the health crisis around COVID, the economic crisis and unemployment crisis that followed out of that. Now the hope is we're starting to move into the reopening, reimagining phase. And we've hosted a couple of sessions here at Revolution, mostly with later stage growth kind of companies. Today is more earlier stage kind of venture companies. And to lead our discussion once again is Ron Klain, who joined us as a co-founder of Revolution 15 years ago, and oversees much of the Revolution operation, but also happens to have a particular expertise in these topics because he took a leave of absence from Revolution, I guess, probably 6 years ago, at the request of President Obama to be the Ebola czar, the Ebola coordinator for the White House. So he brings that perspective, understanding how to mobilize resources around a crisis to Revolution and to the companies we back. So I'll now turn it over to Ron to lead a discussion with three great entrepreneurs from all over the country that give us great hope for the future. Ron?
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for your very thoughtful remarks and opening. As Steve alluded to, this is the third in a series of events we've been holding, virtual events we've been holding, about reopening in the wake of the COVID crisis. We began our first one looking at how the hospitality industry was trying to get back on track with companies like Cava, Mint House, and Convene. 2 weeks ago, we did a feature on sports with our Revolution Growth partner, Ted Leonsis, the owner of the Wizards and the Caps and the Mystics, and Jason Robbins, the CEO of DraftKings. Today, we look at a third topic. How are smaller startups facing the challenge of reopening with all the policies, procedures, and limitations that the coronavirus epidemic still imposes on them? How do they bring their teams safely back to the office? How do they get their businesses growing in this kind of an environment? We're going to look at that outside, as Steve alluded to, outside the context of Silicon Valley or New York City. What does this look like in the rest of the country? And we're going to hear today from CEOs from Indianapolis, Dallas, and Milwaukee. So let's get underway with this conversation. I want to start today with Robin Fleming. She's the CEO of Anvil. It's a startup in my hometown of Indianapolis, Indiana. It's always great to see the hometown folks. Robin's company, Anvil, produces safety software to predict and prevent injuries for employees primarily engaged in hazardous work. She's got about 10 employees, and I know she's planning on reopening her office this month. Robin, before we talk about what it's going to be like to bring some of those people back into the office, I want to talk about Anvil itself. One thing you've done recently is launch a product to help other startups and other businesses bring their workers back to the office safely. So why don't you talk about that first, and then we'll get a little bit into what it's like to run Anvil.
Sure. Thanks, Ron. And thanks for having me on this event. This is great. So our overarching mission with Anvil is to eliminate operational paperwork and provide a guided experience for frontline workers in the moment that gives them a voice and helps them be safer and even more productive. So, and when you look at kind of the ROI, we know that for every dollar spent, proactively on safety, there is the potential for $2 to $6 of savings in return. We also know that engaged workers are less likely to be injured. So ultimately, our focus is really around delivering solutions that engage the workers in a meaningful way so that we can have truly positive outcomes and a cultural change. And one unique thing about our solution that's really helped us from a COVID perspective, we're mobile first. We purpose-built our solution for frontline workforce and even have the ability to support an offline mode. And then all of the data from our mobile application is captured in real time so that managers and leaders and supervisors can have rich data for analysis and trending and outcomes. As a result of how we design the software, we can truly implement just about any type of process or procedure. And our focus has been largely on safety, pre-hazard assessments, lockout, tagout, work permits. But the way we built the software allowed us to quickly build a template for COVID. So our templates that we have available today are about, employee pre-screening. Before they even come to the office, they can use our mobile solution to check in, to get guidance. And all of that is in the moment with real-time data. So we feel very fortunate that we had a software product that was flexible enough for us to tailor it for COVID.
So Robin, before we move on, I do want to give you one chance. We've got a couple hundred startup CEOs, founders listening. If people want to use the Anvil product to help them manage their workforce, how do they get it? Where do they find it?
So you go to anvil.com, that's anvl.com/COVID. Lots of information on our website, just anvil.com. And then we have a COVID page as well that gives you lots of additional information.
Great, that's great. So let's now pivot to your role now as CEO of Anvil. As I said, you've got about 10 employees, I think. What are you going to do when you bring your workforce back to the office? And how do you, as a CEO of a relatively small company, a growing company, but a small company, manage all this without a big HR department or consultants or some of the stuff that bigger employers are using?
Yeah, so, first we've been, as a software company, we're truly blessed in our ability to work remote and let that be, it was truly not very difficult for us to make that transition. I think the most difficult part was, folks with children at home and family members, which really caused us to be very flexible on accommodating work hours, encouraging time off, so that folks could get a break. We do have someone in a role in our team that serves as really office manager and HR. And, in a small startup, you have utility players, but we've worked as a leadership team really from the day that we decided we would shut the office down, which was, well back in March. We've stayed, really well informed. You guys have been great at giving us information. We've really followed CDC very closely on protocols and guidelines. And then even the state of Indiana has been really proactive about back to work kits. There's organizations in Indy, the CICP provided work kits, and even our local Fishers city, where our office is, provided guidance on an ongoing basis. So we've really leveraged that and just our small little leadership team and our HR facility person to make those plans.
And what's the one piece of advice you'd give to other, again, I said we have a couple hundred startup CEOs, founders listening today, you'd give to other people who are looking at this and saying, I feel like I'm overwhelmed. Running my startup is hard enough as it is. Now I'm supposed to read a CDC manual and understand about cleaning workspaces and deep cleaning, all these things. Give some advice to others about how you're managing this and how they should think about it.
I think, the most important thing is communication. So every employee deserves to feel safe and protected. So it might feel overwhelming, but you need to spend the time to communicate with employees about what's going on, what the plans are. Even if you don't precisely know, letting employees know where you stand and engaging them in the process and having that dialogue is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important things. And then you do have the tactical issues that we're dealing with as well, is how are we social distancing when we get back into the office? What are the protocols? We will benefit from using our own solution. Before someone comes into work, they'll use Anvil for a pre-screening, and we'll ask them to do temperature checks at home. Indiana has a back to work kit. We've got our PPE kit with sanitizers, and we just have a wonderful support system in Indiana. But a lot is on you as a leader to really kind of communicate and lay out those plans. And it is work, and it will be work ongoing.
Great. Robin, thank you. Again, that's anvil.com, ANVL.com. Thank you. We're going to continue with Robin. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. Before I go to our next speaker, Cameron Johnson, I do want to tell people, if you want to use the Q&A function on Zoom, you can submit questions, and I will be taking some of those questions and posing them to our panelists at the end. But I do want to now move on to Cameron Johnson from Nixon. Cameron's in Dallas, and what they do is they're reimagining how to furnish apartments, living facilities, and now home offices too. Nixon has nearly 20 employees split between an office team and warehouse and driving teams. Office employees are still working at home, as I understand it, but your warehouse employees and drivers are essential workers, and they've been delivering furniture to people during this difficult time. So let's talk about that, Cameron. Let's start with the folks who've been out there during this period of time, bringing your products, bringing your solutions to people. How are you helping those essential workers, those frontline workers in this difficult period?
Sure. Thanks, Ron. So we have, as you alluded to, operations teams that deliver, living solutions that are comprised of everything you need to live, an apartment or even a senior living facility. So during COVID, we have been, literally bringing people beds, dishes, pots, pans, everything they need, and actually couldn't go out in the world and procure. In order to keep, our staff safe as they went on the front lines, we not only closely followed the CDC guidelines, implementing things, practices around disinfecting. We went hopefully a step further and created, mini quarantine circles. And so we bring in the essential personnel needed to fulfill the day's task. And we have basically Team A, Team B, Team C that we rotate on an as-needed basis. So we bring them in, we provide them gloves, we provide them masks. We service senior living facilities. So they even went in with, what could be akin to hazmat suits. But the idea of, making sure they feel protected and are protecting, our customers became paramount when COVID hit.
So Cameron, again, before we go on to ask a little more about Nixon, I do want to give you a chance to talk about some of the solutions you're providing people during this period. As you said, people still need furniture. People need furniture to work at home. They need furniture, obviously, in senior centers, whatnot, during this difficult period of time. If people want to access Nixon to help deliver some of these solutions, how can they find it?
Sure. So we are online, digitally native business, nixonliving.com, NICKSON living.com. And for Nixon Work From Home, it is nixonwfh.com.
Great. So I want to go back to what you said a minute ago, Cameron. I'm sure people in other startups are listening to this, feeling daunted about the idea of Team A, Team B, Team C, people in hazmat-ish kind of suits, so on and so forth. How do you, as a relatively small startup, manage that? What do you say to your fellow founders and CEOs who say, look, I just can't afford it. I can't be that sophisticated. Maybe that's something for the big companies, but it's not really for me.
Sure. So I would encourage them to lean into it as you do sort of any other problem. So, as a technology startup, you may have needed email servers or different softwares that you didn't have or implementing a CRM. I would view this no differently as a infrastructure your business needs to continue to thrive, because ultimately all our companies are simply comprised of people. And so keeping your people safe and happy and having strong well-being is as important as being able to reach your customers. And I actually believe that there is a benefit you will see from your customers, and we've seen of taking care of your people makes your customers feel as if you're taking care of them. And so very similar to investments in other sort of softwares, investments in the hardware that is fighting COVID has a return, even if it doesn't seem tangible at first.
And so Cameron, as you alluded to, you've done something that I'm sure feels very challenging to people in the startup community, which is you've launched essentially a new product line in the middle of this crisis, Nixon Work From Home. And so tell me how you did that. I mean, I think a lot of founders I talk to are trying just to keep everything going during this difficult time. You're doing something new. How did you pull that off?
Absolutely. So there was opportunity abound, in a crisis, right? So we were actually pulled in this direction by some of our customers, and then just outreach from the community and CEOs who are trying to solve their problems. And now is not only a time for defense, it's potentially a time for offense, and to say, how can I use my business model to lean into other opportunities that may exist? Maybe not full pivots, but in our experience, we were able to say, okay, well, we can turn an apartment into a home in a matter of hours. And now people, are in need of desk chairs and printers and potentially small desks for their children. And, people are doing Zoom classes with their kids and walk-in closets and are looking to solve this problem. And so is there an opportunity for us to take our product and our infrastructure and point it to, a new solution that doesn't require sort of reinventing the wheel, but just sort of changing it, if you will, slightly. And in attacking this, it actually added like new energy and new life to the company. And that, waking up and fighting every day and saying, how do we live? How do we survive is one thing, but to just reframe it and say, how do we thrive and how do we come out better is really, given all that's going on, been very positive for the workforce. And so once we, quite frankly, once we sort of put the idea out there, our team jumped on it and was excited about the opportunity of getting back to, the real work of innovating and finding new customers and solving new problems.
That's great, Cameron. It's really a great, inspiring message. So now let's get down to another piece of the nitty gritty. Next month, I believe you're going to start to bring the office staff back into work. How are you thinking about that? How are you going to manage that? And I guess Robin wants to know, will you use Anvil to try to get those people back to work safely?
I do.
Sure. So we will look at sort of any and all tools. We're going to bring people back on a voluntary as needed basis. And given that, we do have an operating component to our business, we are already, we're OSHA compliant and follow those rules. And so we're going to do our best to be, we don't want to be a market leader from a timing perspective. So not to force people to come back before absolutely necessary, but we want to be a market leader from a safety perspective. And so the idea of social distancing, we will implement with our desks, the idea of having people stagger start times, stagger end times, daily cleaning and daily disinfecting of restrooms and kitchen area. We've even contemplating getting people their own mini fridges, and so they can feel safe, and their own mini microwaves. Again, these are some, I guess, marginal investments that we'll make, but the idea is to, if people are going to come back, hopefully make it as safe for them as we can, with them having as much peace of mind as they can. And there are, between Revolution and the other VCs and just a host of resources out there, which, it's kind of painstaking to go through, but you can follow the best practices from a epidemiology standpoint, and, hopefully people will feel good about it.
It's great, Cameron. Well, I'll come back to Cameron in the Q&A session, but I do want to move on now to our third CEO and co-founder, and that's Richard Yao, who's the co-founder of Bright Cellars, a Milwaukee-based e-commerce wine business that helps people discover and get shipments of wines that they love. If Robin and Cameron have both kind of launched new products in the course of this pandemic, the team at Bright Cellars is definitely pushing a product that many people are using during this pandemic, drinking a little more wine at home. So Richard, you have a team of over 60 employees now, and you've actually grown during this time. So first of all, tell me a little bit about your workforce, where they're working now, and how that's changing.
Sure, thanks, Ron. Well, our primary office is home, as we would expect. So I think that's, of course, a major change. We have a warehouse where we still have where we're still operating in the warehouse, but for the most part, the big change has been, continuing to do our work, but at home. The transition happened back in March, along with a lot of other companies, and we've learned a lot since then. And we're just starting to really think about the longer term for this and really balance a lot of the sort of cost benefit for how and when we return back to the office, and really have gotten it down to phases and how we're thinking about those phases progressing.
So I kind of made a slight joking allusion to it before, but I mean, people are talking about the fact that it's tough to be at home or they're having more time at home. They're consuming more wine. Tell me what kind of changes you're seeing on the consumer side of this during the pandemic.
Absolutely. So prior to COVID, I think a lot of particularly for the summer season, we weren't seeing, as far as consumer behavior, really as much wine grow as fast as I know everyone's sort of been aware of hard seltzer and craft beer and all of these things going on. And what we've really seen with consumers and our member base in particular is that people really are slowing down. They're enjoying a glass of wine, spending time at home with their family, cooking meals, and spending the time to do this thoughtfully, intentionally. And that's been really encouraging to see for being in the wine business, because wine is at times snobby and difficult and inaccessible. And so at Bright Cellars, we've invested a lot of our time in thinking about making it accessible, wine education, pairings, meals, and all of this really just became a lot more relevant with people spending time at home. And so that's been encouraging for us. It's been motivating for our team, and it's really led us to double down on developing this education. We've done a lot more with videos. We've done a lot more with pairings, wine education, even things like what's the right serving temperature for a wine, or how do you save a bottle that you don't finish? And it's sort of all of these things. I think it's really encouraging to see that our members, our subscribers, are really doing this thoughtfully, and it's motivating us to continue to develop those things.
Well, and so Richard, because of this increased interest in wine and increased consumption of wine at home, you've actually added employees, as I understand it, during this period. What's it like to add a new employee when the office is shut down? How do you make them part of the team, part of the culture, if they're not, coming into the classic startup shared workspace situation?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned that. We had a senior leadership meeting a couple weeks ago and realized that two people in that meeting had never met in person. That was actually the first time that they were introduced to each other. So really, that was a moment where we thought we have to be a lot more intentional, and we're not going to have the kitchen water cooler snack type of conversations. And so we really had to go back and sort of create a little bit more structure around something that's typically less structured. So prior to COVID, we did an all hands meeting once a week, and we've been intentional about increasing the time for that meeting. And there's something that we've really noticed about meetings across the board, is that we've noticed that meetings have actually, in general, gone faster. So what was previously a 30-minute meeting is now a 10, 15-minute meeting, but we noticed that they're becoming more transactional, and we're missing that sort of innovative time, or missing that sort of unstructured time. So we've been really intentional about thinking about that, how we can add those pieces back. Some of it is tech enabled, so we have more as far as virtual whiteboarding, more visuals now, but we're also being intentional about saying, hey, let's go around the room and let's hear from everyone. And we've had to do that a little bit more intentionally. And then as far as new employees joining, it actually took us 2 weekly meetings to get through this, but we had everyone introduce themselves, share their role, and then do something a little bit fun. I think the last one we did was, tell us about a hobby or an interest you have that that the team wouldn't know about. And we found that to be successful, and perhaps a little bit better than saying, doing just an unstructured, say, virtual happy hour, which I know we've all had a ton of happy hours at this point and have a little bit of fatigue around. So putting some structure to what is typically unstructured.
And Richard, can I just ask you one more question about that? We've talked about with Rob and with Cameron, some of the nitty gritty aspects of kind of managing the situation as people come back to the office, gloves and masks and deep cleaning and disinfecting. But there's also kind of a softer side to it, which is how do you build and maintain your culture, the ethos, the feel of your startup as you first of all work from home and then you transition back to the office. How are you thinking about those softer cultural issues on top of everything else? Obviously, it's very important. Got to get the basic things right. Got to make sure everyone's safe. Got to make sure people are appropriately social distancing. But then you also have to keep the culture of the place the right way. How are you thinking about that?
Absolutely. And I touched on this a little bit. In particular, I think a key part of our culture is the innovation and sort of idea generation piece, the unstructured part of, okay, we've moved through the to-do list, items on our meetings really quickly. How do we actually talk about, I mentioned wine education earlier. We're doing some new things that didn't exist before COVID. For example, we're doing video tutorials on wine pairings. And that's one piece that kind of has to come out of a culture of innovation. So we're thinking about that. I mentioned earlier that we've added capability for some brainstorming, virtual whiteboarding. There's different, of course, softwares available out there to do that, and really think about sort of this unstructured time. And then as far as really social things, as I mentioned, I think we've seen a little bit of fatigue around virtual happy hours at this point. And I think that really what we found makes it more meaningful is having an activity or an objective. So we did an event that was Bright Sellers Trivia. So we had the team sort of split up, or we had Bright Sellers split up into teams, and it was both about, because it was Bright Sellers Trivia, new employees were learning about the company, fun things that we've done in the past, getting some of that without being able to do it in person. And then it also gave us an opportunity to kind of share company history and have a little competition. And another thing that's been very well received, we're on our second iteration of this at this point, is that we've had a company wide step challenge. So we're tracking steps. And again, we kind of have different teams. And of course, it's encouraging us to stay active, and also some friendly competition. And then and people have members of their team that then otherwise wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to meet, in particular for members that are outside, sort of cross team, sort of sub team lines at Bright Sellers. So that's been fun. And we're sort of on our second iteration of that. And of course there are prizes involved and all of that, but really beyond sort of just working with some of the challenges in being remote, we found that having a little bit more of an objective is better than saying, hey, it's 5 o'clock, let's all show up on a Zoom with a glass of wine.
Great. Well, so Richard, so I'm going to go to questions. We've got a number of questions submitted. Before I do, though, I want to give you a chance to tell people, for those of us who are still doing our Zoom happy hours and would find them less fatiguing, perhaps if we did them by enjoying Bright Sellers while we did our Zoom happy hours, how can people find Bright Sellers in your products?
Sure, absolutely. It's just brightsellers.com. And what we do is you have a quiz, and so it's bright like a light, BRIGHT. And then sellers like a wine cellar. And you take a quiz, and based on how you answer that, we match you to wine personalized to your preferences. And with each of the boxes, we have wine education that we kind of build on month over month. You learn about the wines you receive, flavors, pairings, and definitely something to try if you've ever been too nervous, as I was at some point before Bright Sellers, to order a wine on a wine list because you didn't know how to pronounce it. For sure, Bright Sellers is for you, so we'd appreciate you giving us a try.
Great, thank you, Richard. All right, so we've got a bunch of questions. We're gonna do a couple of them. I wanna get people out of here on time, be respectful of the time, but I do wanna ask you a couple of questions we've gotten submitted from people. One question people are asking, without knowing about your specific office situations, but the classic startup situation, Generally, you have people kind of in shared space. You have people working closely together. That's part of the culture, part of the ethic of it. How are you adjusting to a more socially distanced layout in your offices when you reopen? How are you going to kind of try to keep that kind of startup spirit going, but in a world where people have to work farther apart in a more kind of distant way? So, Robin, why don't I start with you? I'll just go around the horn for people's thoughts on this.
Sure. We are very fortunate that we've got a fantastic office location just outside of downtown Indianapolis in Fishers, Indiana. And you know, the cost of living and truly building a startup in the Midwest and in particular Indy is very cost effective. So we have a pretty large space. So we feel confident that we'll be able to, you know, leverage our conference rooms. We have an open workspace right now. So we plan to move the desk apart a bit. And we do plan when we go back to continue wearing PPE for some period of time. We're you know, kind of taking this a step at a time to see kind of how things shake out and how comfortable employees are. But we do intend to keep making those precautions. And from a cost perspective and effort, it's not much to move desk around for us. We can continue to work remote if we need to and be very effective. So I think we're in as good a shape as we possibly could be. And given we don't have a lot of fixed assets and we're not dealing with supply chain and discrete manufacturing deliverables, all of our IP is in our mind and with what we create. So I feel confident that we're in good shape.
Good. Cameron, how about you?
Sure. So we, similar to Robin, you know, following all guidelines and doing your best to be safe, but at the same time, want to get back the sort of fun elements that come to working with the startup. And for us, that's we used to, you know, throw a football around. And so our office previously was, you know, very well laid out and, you know, looked, you know, we did our best to make it look like something out of a magazine. We're now contemplating when people come back, you know, having fun with it, making it silly, arranging the desk 6 feet apart, but in a big circle. So people are looking at each other and have the ability to yell across and, you know, still can see each other face to face. But the thought of how do we sort of break the old norms, even if that means things feel a bit wonky and look a bit funky, but hopefully that, again, you know, kind of gives us the ability to smile at it. And so that's sort of our thought of how we're going to approach sort of bringing people back and reopening, just sort of just break the old norms and have fun with it as best we can.
I like wonky and funky as a combination. Richard, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the key piece is balance here. I think like Cameron and Robin mentioned, we're really looking to follow all the guidelines as far as returning to the office. And in this current phase through the end of the month, we're really having only essential activity happen in the office, even given those guidelines. And really we're very focused on the next stage, which for us is July and August, which is that the office still isn't the primary workspace or isn't the default workspace, but we're really starting to bring in things that are not strictly necessary to do in the office, but things that we can really get a good return on without cramming 60 people back into our space. And so basically getting some of the benefits, we're thinking about what type of meetings. We've also explored the sort of, you know, desks in a circle kind of format that's socially distanced. But we're exploring sort of what is our biggest leverage? Are these monthly team meetings? Are these cross-functional type of things? So to get as much of that without immediately needing to make the investment to sort of say, we are going to figure out how 60 people fit in a space that likely is not going to fit that number of people anymore. So, and at the same time, sort of thinking post-summer, when we go back to September, thinking about, you know, the office becoming the primary place of work again, what needs to happen. And really, we're going to be looking at more space, looking at sort of some of the build out type of options that have been discussed, and really, but ahead of being able to do those things and invest in those things, we want to start using the office to really support the culture piece as soon as is feasible.
That's great. So I want to have one last question before I make a few closing comments. And you know, Robin alluded to the fact that she's based outside of Indianapolis, Indiana, nearby suburb, Fishers, and talked about some of the benefits during this time of being outside of Silicon Valley, outside of New York City. You know, obviously, Revolution, Rise the Rest, that's what we back. We believe there are great startups all over the country. We believe not only are they out there, but there are some advantages to being outside of Silicon Valley in New York. So as you all deal with these issues, seek not only to survive, but thrive in this crisis, how does being outside of Silicon Valley, being outside of New York City, being in Milwaukee or Dallas or Indianapolis, shape your thinking and make your situation perhaps a little different than one of the startups in these more traditional startup areas? Let me go back around the opposite way this time. Richard, I'll start with you in Milwaukee.
Sure, absolutely. I think Robin alluded to this earlier. I think we're seeing sort of benefits when we're thinking about cost of living, and really our team is growing during that period. We're currently working on a potential relocation from the coast, from Boston, and I think it's exciting that people are seeing some of the benefits that we've known all along in building the business here in Milwaukee, but those are becoming more top of mind. Different things, sort of, I mentioned the step challenge earlier, just sort of, you know, the parks, our outdoor space, density, all of these pieces really make for potentially, you know, really improved sort of living here in Milwaukee. So we're excited that more people are paying attention to that, especially considering some of the challenges, you know, are going to exist for the foreseeable future.
Great. Cameron?
Yeah, so, you know, kind of echoing Robin's sentiments as well around, you know, just the inherent benefits and being in certain markets. What we've seen, you know, in Dallas, you know, we're one of the fastest growing cities in terms of, you know, population growth. We have 50,000 apartment units under construction. And so while we're not in Silicon Valley and don't have that density, the benefit is that, you know, there are inherent things like real estate costs are cheaper, people drive. And so, you know, you don't, you know, for better or worse, the lack of reliance on public transportation has become somewhat of a benefit during COVID. And so we are seeing some of our, you know, kind of trendsetters take space and sign leases. So throughout COVID, we've seen announcements from Uber taking space in Dallas, Airbnb, not Airbnb, other companies, Amazon taking space in Dallas at the Star, which is a practice facility for the Dallas Cowboys. So the space and the assets we have being used and reimagined by these other companies that need to, you know, potentially get out of their situations and get to a place where it is more friendly from a social distancing perspective, which has allowed us to take advantage of that. Also, you know, we recently signed and hired an intern from Stanford, which, to our surprise, you know, what are the odds that he'd be looking at a company located in Dallas? But with this new idea of work from anywhere and the world is flat, it's democratizing sort of opportunity. And so being in Dallas, you know, while it may have had its drawbacks, you know, previously from the density of an ecosystem perspective, now that the world is flatter, the people are able to see some of the benefits more clearly. And so we're leaning right into that.
That's great. And Robin, you alluded to this before, but why don't you give us more of a picture of the advantages of being in a place like Indianapolis?
Yeah, I think right now, certainly with kind of the playing field being leveled from remote work, we've all been working remote. Lots of companies in one way or another working remote, and that kind of levels the playing field a lot when you're in the Midwest. I'm a walking advertisement for Indiana and you know, the Midwest. I think there are tremendous advantages to building a startup in the Midwest and building a startup in Indiana. We've got some really great examples of companies that are growing and that have exited. So I think the advantages for Midwest and particularly Indiana is just that healthy startup ecosystem, that Midwest attitude about how we help each other out. And then with COVID really changing the way people think about working, and it's affecting all of us, I think we have the ability now to recruit talent that maybe doesn't need to relocate immediately, but I think once they visit, they'll want to, because I think the advantages with, in Indy with less traffic and, really just a great environment have huge benefits, and we love it here.
That's great, Robin. Well, I want to thank all three of you and close with these three takeaways, I think, from this conversation. The first is that even relatively small startups can and need to and are making the investments they need to make to keep their workers safe, keep their customers safe. They're really mindful of the safety issues and the health issues here, and they're finding ways to do that without big HR departments, without big consultants. They're doing this work on their own, and they're doing their best to try to keep their workers safe. And it's part of their ethic as founders and leaders to do that. And I think that's very admirable. Secondly, we're hearing about startups innovating during this difficult period, whether that's Robin launching her new COVID-related product, or Cameron getting into the work from home business, Richard expanding and growing Bright Cellars, adding employees during this time. These are three examples of startups adding new lines of business, expanding their businesses, innovating, growing during this difficult time. And I think that's a very hopeful message and a really good lesson for all of us about what can happen. And finally, we're hearing once again the benefits of startups outside of the big tech hubs of New York and Silicon Valley. That's not just lower costs, so that's one of them, but also better quality of life for their workforce, all kinds of opportunities to expand and manage in this circumstance, and greater familiarity with remote work and the kinds of tools and techniques that are succeeding during this difficult period. So I want to thank again Richard, Robin, and Cameron for participating today. I want to thank all of you for joining us for this third in our series of roundtables. If you missed the first two or missed part of this one, you can go to revolution.com and see summaries from the earlier ones, clips and highlights from them, and learn more about Revolution and Rise of the Rest and what we're doing. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good weekend. And please, everybody, stay safe. Thanks.